The journey to identity is not static nor linear. The formation shifts and its fluidity driven by those that narrate and script their lived experience. Our panelists have captured stories of reclaiming, embracing, and discovering family histories that produce a dynamic and complex view into this topic, journey to identity. In this hour, our filmmakers discuss their pursuit and the significance as storytellers through the visual arts medium to capture and preserve our AAPI stories as a part of the American narrative. Hello, my name is Victoria Takeda, a committee member with the Silicon Valley Asian Pacific Film Festival. I'm here to welcome you to our CATS panel, Journey to Identity, as we spotlight 3 films that will be screened at our film festival, which opens Friday, October the 28th. I would now like to introduce you to Leanne Lam of Contemporary Asian Theater Scene, who will introduce you to tonight's moderator, Keith Koo. Leanne?
Hello, and thank you so much for welcome to this program, all about Journey to Identity. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot, and if you have any questions, please put them into the chat. I'd like to introduce my moderator today, Keith Koo. Keith is in his 5th season of the Silicon Valley Insider radio show and podcast. He's also a vice president at US Capitol, which area he focuses on expanding the group's security distribution team and on originating new business for the group. He's been a business and technology executive with over 2 decades of experience in banking, corporate development, and finance. He leverages his wide business and technology and media networks to support US Capitol at leading financial summits, conferences, and panels across the US and nationally. Keith has been a major supporter of the Silicon Valley Asian Pacific Film Festival, and I'm so excited that he could join us today between his travels. Keith, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks, Leanne. Thanks again, Vicky and Leanne, for inviting me to moderate today's session with such an amazing group of filmmakers. I do want to just quickly say that I love the work that Contemporary Asian Theater Scene has done, and the annual Silicon Valley Asian Pacific Film Festival, which is starting on October 28th through the 29th in person at the AMC Dine-In, as well as online October 28th through November 6th. So make sure you go to svapfilmfest.org to find out more about that. So once again, just want to thank everyone for this opportunity to just host this group. Leanne's going to be my co-host, and we're going to have a conversation with these filmmakers on their journey. And I think what's really relevant, being both Asian American and we also have Canadian Asians with us, is just understanding that even though there seems to be more Asian faces in the West, that we still struggle with identity all the time. And we're always looking for meaning and how to connect our family heritage and then where we've immigrated to. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists for tonight. So if everyone can turn on their cameras, it'll be good to meet everyone. And so first, I'd like to introduce Alison Ham and Andrea Kuntjoro, who have produced Just Eat. We have Tam No. Let's go ahead. Yeah, and we have Tam No, who is produced Rise from the Fall, and we have Briell Yuke, and we have Rouwen Chen, who have produced The Closing. So welcome all of you. Thanks again for being here tonight. So why don't we get just a little bit of introduction to each of you. So we'll start off with Alison and Andrea first.
For sure, yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Kuntjoro, and I was the co-writer, producer, and director alongside my best friend, Alison, over there. And we created Just Eat. And currently I'm in my 4th year of university at the University of Toronto, where I study global health, physiology, and immunology. But post-undergrad, I will be doing everything film. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you.
My name is Alison, and I'm currently in my 4th year studying film studies at Toronto Metropolitan University. Oh, I'm also the co-producer, co-writer, co-director, and editor of the film Just Eat.
Great, thanks. Briell and Ella.
Hi everyone, this is Briell Yuke. I'm the producer of the drama short film The Closing Night. And I'm Ella Chen, and I'm the writer, producer, and actress of The Closing Night.
And Tam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tam No. I'm a co-producer for Rising from the Fall. It's a documentary that captures this perspective of the elders that survived the Vietnam War and gives voice to the younger generation, where they were how they raised us. In the documentary, we wanted to design a space for dialogue so that we can learn who we are, why we're here, and what we've been through. A little bit about myself. I am an entrepreneur. I've started up several of my own businesses, also in nonprofits as well. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for the introductions. Good to meet all of you. And Tam, since we talked a little bit about your film, why don't we talk about the protagonist in your film, and how did that story come about? What made you want to tell that story?
So this documentary is created by me and my co-producer, and she's also the director, Nok Lee. And we sat down at lunch one day just catching up. We were high school friends, and this is us like post-college. And we were just kind of sharing things going on in our family. And then we started identifying very similar storyline. So then we went home, talked to my mom, and found out that my mom and her grandfather served as spies in the CIA during the Vietnam War. And so it was just strange to us for me to realize my family history, but for her not to know it. And so we started seeing that like, oh, a lot of families go through this where we don't know like where we came from, or in some families we talk about it a lot, but there's still so much to unpack. And so that's kind of how we got started with our documentary. And we hope it inspires other families to really dig into their history and learn about all the obstacles that our parents have faced, that we have faced, and then, help us shape our identity from there.
That's an amazing story. And off camera, off microphone, off this thing, I'll have to introduce you to one of my closest friends who has a very similar story from her experience in Vietnam, that her father also too was a spy, and just the connection that happens over that. Yeah. So I'll introduce you
yes,
offline.
Please.
Yeah. She's a marketer. She's that. Yeah, we'll do that offline, but that's just amazing. And so thank you so much. To Alison and Andrea, the same question. The protagonist in your story, how did that come about? What was the genesis of coming with the idea?
Yeah, so for our project, we kind of came up with the ideas when there was a huge spike in Asian hate crimes during COVID. It led Ali and I to have a lot of conversations just about being Asian, being born to, for me, an immigrant, being born to immigrant parents, and for Ali being third gen, and just identity in general, and how Asian discrimination really comes from a lack of understanding. And during this time, we were in online school, so we also had a lot more time, and we thought, hey, like, this seems like something we're both really passionate about, and maybe we could tell a story about this. So we decided that we wanted to make a film about a young girl, basically Ali and I's age, just a teenager, and just the experience of growing up in Western society. And so we took a lot of personal anecdotes from each other's stories, and we also reached out to family, friends, and made an anonymous survey to hear the experiences of other people. And that eventually just led to us making our character in our film.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about your character film, because you have a Canadian perspective, and I know in terms of the West, there was a huge rise in anti-Asian discrimination and hate incidents in the United States. Was that similar in Canada?
Yeah, and it was quite crazy because even in Vancouver, it was really happening in places that we walk around to go get brunch. Like, Asian hate crimes were just happening there too. And that was a really scary thing. And so I think that is what made Ali and I so passionate to tell this story. And for me, I'm Indonesian, but born and raised in Vancouver. And Ali is half Korean, half Chinese. And we decided to go with a Korean story, but I think it's a lot of experiences that we touched on are very applicable for just Asians who grow up in Western society. Like, I think there are a lot of relatable situations. So that's how we came up with our character.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Briell and Ella, your protagonist story, and I've heard a little bit about it already, but it's a great story. So why don't we talk about that?
Yes, so I graduated from theater school in 2020. And which was a horrible time to graduate in. And then at the same time, I feel like as an actor, a lot of directors that I normally would work with are Chinese directors who are like fresh graduates or in film school. But at that time, a lot of people left America to go back to China because of COVID. And I just really felt like there were fewer opportunities, like a lot less opportunities than I normally have. So at that time, I was starting to think about maybe I should do something on my own. And then at the same time, because I'm a fresh graduate out of college, I was being pitched to agents and managers by a very lovely mentor. But the feedback I got at the time was like, she has an accent. We can't pitch her as an American, or we can't pitch her for American roles. And then that just felt like a huge setback for me, because I was like, I just was so ready to like go into the world and everything. So that's kind of how the closing night came out, was kind of a sort of a flashback story of me in college, coming from China, and as a Chinese student in an American theater school with an accent, and how that felt. And then later on, I found Briell, my producing partner, and then we found Shitong, our director, who can't be here today. But and then from there we kind of had the story and the film going.
Yeah, thanks for being vulnerable. I think that's a very uniquely, I mean, immigrants can suffer from this, but it's very uniquely Asian in that the term microaggression or the term perpetual foreigner. So this concept that because we have an accent or because we look different, and most of my experience in the United States, that somehow we're not accepted, we're not the same, right? So I talked about off microphone, I talked about how my own father, who was an executive in the 80s, was told that he couldn't present to the board anymore because he had an accent, nothing to do with his performance. And so that really resonates when you tell me your story. And I kind of want to open this back up then to in the US, there was a lot of news about physical violence against Asians, but the most frequent hate incidents against Asians is something called perpetual foreigner, or actually othering, or that, we're not American, even though we might be born here in Canada or United States. And so in terms of these microaggressions, how did this resonate as you've come up with your movie, as you've told your story? And I will go to Alison and Andrea first.
So in terms of how it comes into our story, there's an incident within the film where they're kind of talking about how this lady should know how to speak English because they're in Canada. And I think language is a big part of, our lives. We speak it every day. And also food is a big part of our identity. So we kind of brought that theme into our film as well. But I feel like there are just a lot of microaggressions that people don't think it's wrong. And it does stem a little bit from lack of understanding, but also ignorance. And for a while, personally, I was able to kind of just let it go and just try to be the bigger person. But as I grew up, I realized, oh, that's not okay. If someone's imitating, like a Chinese accent or a Korean accent in front of me, I shouldn't just like let it be. I should say something about it, because even if I don't have the accent personally, my grandparents do, or my parents do. And I think it's an age where we can kind of like speak up more. And
Yeah, that's that hits very close to home. During COVID, I had a friend for a very long time, but he was always making fun of Asian accents. And so he was kind of doing that during the pandemic, which I told him was really not cool. The reason why I bring this up is because he's like, well, all my friends are Asian. Like, all your friends might be Asian, but they're being silent about how offensive you are in terms of using like the fake whatever accent. And so, but yeah, typical, as you just mentioned, Alison, they didn't think it was wrong. They still don't think it's wrong. And it's kind of like, basically if an Asian were using a Southern drawl for no reason in the United States, it's kind of a similar thing. Andrea, what about you?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with a lot of the things Ali said. And just in general, I think, especially with Asian culture, we're kind of trained in a way to not really speak up just to avoid conflict. And I definitely went along with that growing up. And because of that, I think that eventually stemmed to me always kind of not really being proud of my Asian culture growing up. I would definitely say it took me until the last maybe 2 years, year and a half to be very sure of myself and embrace my Asian identity. And I would say that like that's because I was silent growing up and let things slide. But now that I'm more sure of my Asian side, I do speak up. And if something happens in front of me, I will say something, because even if it's just a small thing, I think eventually that adds up. And if we as an Asian community speak up on the little things, then it won't build up. And yeah, that's my thoughts on this.
No, that's great. I fully encourage people to speak up. I think also coming from immigrant family, and this is why I'm going to go to Tam next. I think she'll have a great perspective, but we're often told by our parents to, not rock the boat, don't bring attention to yourself, just let it go. And I'm definitely not that person. And so that was causing tension with my own family as I grew up, because I definitely won't let it go. So I think, Tam, your whole movie is about intergenerational perspective on being immigrants and what's expected. So what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. So my documentary definitely, taking the perspective of the older generation and the younger generation, there's a lot of pressure to assimilate, and oftentimes we'll end up putting that pressure upon ourselves, which is what you mentioned earlier. Our it's passed along that we understand the sentiments of like, you don't rock the boat. And I think that definitely speaks to why the Stop Asian Hate movement right now is at such a critical peak, is because people are no longer allowing that silence to go on. But definitely in regards to what we are trying to achieve with the film is to make sure to have that dialogue and that line of communication within ourselves. And it can start with our families. Because if we don't tell our story, then who's going to tell our story for us? And if we don't know our history, how are we going to make sure the next generation after us know all that went on, everything that we've fought for, all the obstacles that we've had to overcome? And so it's really important, especially that we not only tell our stories, but when things do come up, such as microaggressions, that we do speak out, because for so long, we've kind of kept our feelings to ourselves, to the point where we don't even say like, I love you to our parents, right? And so if we can break those chains, then we can really, really start to like raise that level for our whole community.
Yeah, thanks, Tam. And Leanne has an interesting perspective. I see her raise her hand.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, Tam, because we're not really trained to use our voice. I think our parents and our education has not encouraged that to happen. But we really need to, especially now, if we don't use our voice now, when will we use our voice? And I'm so encouraged by this group of filmmakers now, because you are using your voice in every aspect of it, whether just to send the quick message, the important message that our stories are worthy, extremely worthy. I think a lot of people don't think it is, because it's just an immigrant story, or it could be a relationship story, but it is so worthy. And it's important for us to step up and explain who we are, because we have a nationwide full of stories that we need to share, and we're way behind. So we have a lot of catching up to do.
Definitely.
Completely. Thank you. Thanks, Tam. And over to Briell and Ella. So similar in discussion about microaggressions, your experience with that, how did that affect or influence your movie?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I guess our perspective would be slightly different, since we are ourselves and our character in the film are we're all born and raised in China. We were not first gen or second gen, so that's kind of like a little bit different obstacles for us. But what we really appreciate is I think in our real lives and also in our film, we definitely, when we first came over to like a new country, as immigrants ourselves, like we definitely felt being an outsider or foreigner all the time. And just like our character in the film, but just like our character, what she learned eventually and what we learned in our real life is that, we at first we felt very self-conscious about our accent. We're not even like a sense of belonging, but just like we stand out as if we are not good enough. But then eventually we realize, even though you have an accent, that could create challenges for you in real life, but that also is your identity. That means that actually represents who you are as a person. And what I think at a critical moment that I realized was, I always felt very self-conscious about being an outsider, either because of my accent here or just growing up, like, throughout my life. Then at a moment I realized, oh, actually, I should change my mindset. Like, being an outsider is actually, it could be cool, like, because I'm different from everybody. I don't have to blend in with the mainstream because I don't want to be like everybody else. Then I have like a different life and I have my own voice. So once I started realizing that, I started embracing my, like, either like in a like, in this sense, like accent or just like everything, like my Asian identity in general, instead of feeling self-conscious about it, that it makes me stand out, but that's actually a good thing. And I think once I realized that, just like our character in the film, that just changed a lot of perspective, how I perceive life and how I live my life. And that just gave me a lot of freedom. So I think that's like for a lot of immigrants or people who are actually, like the people who have Asian diaspora experience, that's something we noticed that a lot of our friends who have similar experience went through, but it's really like, represented on the mainstream media. And once we like talked, me and Ella talked, we found out like we have very similar experiences. Even though I'm not an actress, I came from a writing background. So when I was like in the writing like in the program, I was the only international student there. And in my year at the time, I think I was the only like Asian person there. We had more like Asian students coming after me, but I definitely felt like, just like that, being self-aware of me being different is always there, even though like my friends were all very nice, but you put that thing on yourself. And I think the only time I feel like I can break through that chains was the moment I realized, oh, like I should embrace this. Just so we want to kind of channel all that feeling and feeling free and feeling proud of who you are through our character in our film.
And I think I want to add on to that. And I think because you said that a lot of stuff are like what you put on yourself, but I also feel like because we grew up in China, we didn't really, at least I didn't have a lot of identity issues growing up,
Right.
because we were all like Asians and we were all like the high majority. And I think after being here, you feel a difference how you are being perceived. You feel like you're lesser of yourself, you're a lesser of your whole package. And to a certain degree, you want to break through that. You want to break through whatever, you want to break through what others sees of you, and you want to be able to present your whole self. And I think people don't realize that, but when they don't see you as your whole self, they're doing the microaggression to a certain degree. So I feel like our film is sort of about that too. It's just wanted to be seen.
Right.
Excellent points. And since you were talking about your unique, the panel being unique in that you're more recent immigrants, I want to talk about the parental aspect of pursuing film. It's not a traditional role, right? For in this day and age, back to stereotypes of what people assume that Asians get into and how they come to Canada, the United States, right? What is it? How did your parents react to your decision to pursue filmmaking?
For me personally, I would still say like part of the stereotype could be true. I think it's just, I think in the traditional Asian culture too, Asian parents like just science or technology is more practical. I changed my major from actually like science and technology background into like screenwriting or like entertainment and film in general when I was in college, when I was still back in Beijing, China. I definitely had a talk with my parents, but I think I'm very lucky that my parents, even though like they feel like, oh, it could be more practical doing that as they would expect, but I try my best to reason with them, to lay out that I have thought about this. I'm a grown up, I have my own ideas. It's not like I decided on this on a whim. I know what I'm doing. And so I kind of like, I just lay out all the like reasonable things that I have and let them see that you actually know what you're doing. I think for me, my communication with my parents, that's one of the most critical points, even though you know, like at this point, there's still a lot of things that they may not agree with me, but they respect what I'm doing because they can see that, okay, you have a plan, you know what you're doing, and you are actually serious. I think that's what a lot of parents may want to see, that, okay, you're not just like, I'm just a kid, I'm just like gonna play with it, I'm just gonna have fun. Having fun is really important, which is also like, you know, an important reason why we do a lot of things that we're doing. But I think especially to more traditional Asian parents, I think to let them see that you're serious and you know what you're doing is like very important, at least in my case. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my case was slightly different because my mom's actually a doctor in China, and I've been told not to become a doctor ever since I was a kid. My mom's like, don't do it, don't do it. My mom's like, unless you move to a different country and be a doctor. But then she was like, don't do it. So yeah, so that's kind of, but she still wanted me to do like economics or stuff more related in that realm. But I've always felt like I've had an urge to perform since I was a kid, and my dad is a little bit more appreciative of that, so he has helped me talk to my mom regarding that and to show her, because my mom is way more academic than my dad and way more academic than me because she's a doctor. But she let her understand that the arts and the performance are not Hollywood entertainment, but they're like real heart and there's real importance, and like there's a craft behind it, and basically there's a seriousness to it, and it's not just like, kind of like what you said, not just like having fun. Well, while it is important, but still it's not just having fun. So I feel like that's what's different. And I also want to, I think having heard Brielle and my story is like, our parents are not those parents that like force you or would be like, if you don't do what we do, we're not going to pay for your like tuition or classes. So I also want to like appreciate our parents for that.
Yeah, we're the lucky ones. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. As we talked about off camera, my daughter is the same way. We don't push her. She can do what she wants. She doesn't have to do STEM. Leanne, you had a comment.
Yeah, Brielle and Ella, you are really the lucky ones, but you also had the right head on your shoulders to explain what your goals were. There was another filmmaker that we had on earlier, and she actually led her family to believe that she was going into a science major, and they didn't realize that she was a filmmaking major until she graduated. Not yeah, not a great thing to do, but it happens. And it's just because of the acceptance of the parents and how much support they can provide. So I really commend you for having that route labeled out and doing your research. I think that's a really good lesson for other people to pick up, that it can happen. You just need to do your research just like you would on any other pursuit that you'd like. So hats off to you.
Thanks, Leanne. Alison and Andrea, how about you? Were your parents supportive, not supportive? Was it a difficult conversation to have?
Okay, well, for me, it was definitely a difficult conversation that still remains difficult until now. But I'll just give some context. So I'd always loved storytelling and film, taking photos, just anything creative growing up. I was always bringing my little camera on vacations, making little video edits to the music, making little films on iMovie with friends. And I never really considered it to be something I would do growing up or like do professionally. I always just thought it was a hobby, but also that's just what everyone around me told me. So I just never thought about it in any other way. And in high school, I was okay at science. So then my parents were like, okay, you're going to be a doctor. And so flash forward to university, I am studying science and I do have an interest in it. But I think during COVID, lots of realizations, as many people had. And one of them was just like, oh, you should do something you really, really love. And I just knew that storytelling was something I really loved. And at that point, I never really had any professional experience in film, or it was just fun stuff with friends growing up. But even in high school, by the end of high school, I was only taking science courses and there's no time to take film courses. And so during COVID, I just devoted those 2 years of online school back in Vancouver to doing everything I could do related to film. So I was just cold emailing production companies and trying to get in all these sets and chatting with people through LinkedIn that were working in LA and New York, anywhere in the world that I could talk to. Where I was on that Facebook group called like the Asians in, it's like an arts, I don't know if you guys know it, but it's like the Asian art filming community with like Asians all over the world in that. And so I was reaching out to people through that, and I actually met up with some of them. And I was doing this all without telling my parents, or if I told them, they would just kind of brush it off and be like, oh, like, you're going to get over this and go to med school eventually. And after all of COVID, I told them that I think like this is actually something I really want to do, because through all those experiences, something really clicked and I just really had so much fun with it. Like I remember being on my first set for 16 hours as a PA, and I was just the happiest person ever. So yeah, like until now, it's definitely a tough thing to talk about with my parents. Like much of the time when this conversation happens, like I'm in tears by the end of it. But I think it kind of pushes me because I know that I'm doing something I love, and who knows, maybe eventually there's going to be a little Simu Liu story where the parents come around, right? So I'm pretty confident in like my idea of doing what I love. So even though it's a tough conversation for now, I still pursue it.
And thanks for being vulnerable. Just to clarify, are you choosing film and media over doing pre-med, or are you doing both?
Well, I study science. So I study global health physiology and immunology. And there was a period where I was like, you know what? I just want to switch majors completely, move schools, all of that. But I'm still very grateful for what I'm studying and interested in it, just from a like intrinsic point of view. So I just do film outside. So all my extracurriculars are film, or I'm doing a film internship, but I still study science.
Got it. Yeah, I want to come back to that a little bit later, but yeah, I wanted to make sure because I wasn't sure if it was a separation. So if you've heard Simu Liu's interviews, and I got to see him live streaming at an event I was at a few months ago, he openly talks about how he did the accounting thing, he did what his family wanted to, and then he didn't like it, you know, and he was fortunate. He actually got laid off, but that actually turned out to be what helped him out. And so I think one thing I'd like to just, you know, encourage everyone is that you can pivot, right? And pivoting is okay. And I'm saving Tam for the end of this question because she's having a perspective. So I wanted to get to Alison first, and then we'll go to Tam.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate because my parents are very supportive. You know, when I was growing up, my dad would literally like make us watch movies with him, and that's kind of the way we bonded as a family, just because I have 4 siblings, so 7 people just in a room watching a movie together. It was very nice, and I think that might have been where my love for cinema came from as well. But as I was applying for schools, my mom did, you know, typical like, you should apply to sciences still. So I did that, and I applied to sciences and film, but ultimately I chose to do film because that's what I love the most. And I think it's make me closer to my family in a way, because every time I have a new idea, I'm like so excited to tell them and then get their notes about my story. So I'm very grateful. Yeah.
And what's your birth order with all your siblings?
I'm second. So I have older
Okay.
sister and then 2 younger brothers and a younger sister.
Got it. All right. Thanks. So Tam, I went to you last on this question because you've done a lot already. You're an entrepreneur. You've started businesses. So the question may or may not be as relevant in how did your parents or your family react to you becoming a filmmaker? So you might have a unique perspective on that.
Yeah, so I didn't become a filmmaker until after I graduated college and got my career in order. I would say that when I was applying for colleges and figuring out what I wanted to do, my parents were very open to me doing everything, but there's definitely always like a nudge towards doing something that is, more lucrative. To the point where I remember I decided on communications major and I was considering becoming a journalist. So my dad took us to a consultant and the journalist did an assessment and said that I wasn't going to be making a lot of money. And I remember just being so angry and just like walking out of there and just saying that like, we just paid a scammer. Like, how does he know like how I'm going to be successful or not? Like, this is, I'm not coming back, But my parents, again, like my parents were supportive in my journey, but I probably would not have had the courage to do this like while I was in college or before I had a career set up, and I feel like even in my choosing of the film style, a documentary, like it very much aligns with the way that my parents raised us. My parents are activists themselves. They took me to my first protest when I was 4 years old. And so the documentary, it touches on a lot of like traditional values and really highlights Vietnamese culture, which is what my parents are all about. So I'm very proud of the documentary, but I do have to be honest that like I still made the documentary in a way that I know they would like have respect for. Yeah.
That's great. No, thanks for sharing that. So the person that your dad took you to sounds more like a fortune teller than actual journalist.
Yeah, like a fortune teller cookie, like it's just it's just nonsense. But it's a little amusing, I suppose. Like there was some drama that happened after that. So
well, that's a question I had for each of you too, is growing up in Asian society, Asian parents, and for those who might not be aware, the Asian model of career advancement from the East is usually like very linear, very much progressive in a job that you do for a long time, and you get promoted based on your performance there. Now you're in the West, and back to being more free thinking, more independent thinking, being able to be creative, that this concept that you can do more than one thing, right? Tam's an example of that. Briell and Ella and Alison and Andrea are early in their careers, but they might come to that realization too. Something that I talk to my children a lot about as well is that you don't have to be stuck to one thing. And that's why I was going on with Andrea, trying to understand if she had abandoned her science studies to just do filmmaking, but she's hedging, to use a business term. She's keeping both of those skill sets. So back to the thought of sticking with Andrea, is that kind of what you were thinking in the back of your head, that you will have the ability to kind of go in both areas?
Yeah, I think during COVID, when I was really like torn between these two things in my life, I at first had this idea like, oh, I have to choose one or the other. But after just like talking to people and just really thinking what I realized, like, oh, science gives me a certain skill set. And even though it may not sound related, there are lots of transferable things that I think I can pull into film one day. And I think it gives me a different perspective on perhaps the films I'm going to make one day. I talk about something happening in exercise physiology, like that sounds like a stretch, but I really actually believe that having like this different background can give me something different in the future with my filmmaking. And so, yeah, I'm happy that I can kind of do both, but it took me some time to realize that it's not all or nothing with one, but you can really just blend everything together. And there is a lot of time in life to pursue like many things too.
That's a great epiphany. Yeah. So that's why I was following up. And Alison, are you thinking of doing more than film? Or do you have other activities that are equally important to you?
Yeah, so during COVID, I picked up crocheting as a hobby and I ended up spending hours on it all day, and I created my own small business called Loop by Ali, plug, but yeah, and I created a YouTube channel surrounding that. So I'm also doing like YouTube as like my job and pursuing school as well. So it's a very flexible job, and I've always had a passion just for creating things in general, which is also arts and crafts. So in the future, I hope to open my own craft store, which is a dream I've had since I was a kid. So yeah.
And I think that goes to the back to understanding that you can do more than one thing. The creator economy is a thing now too, right? And so I have made friends who are doctors, dermatologists, who have a YouTube channel. So they both practice and they create content, and they're selling their content or their courses or to get reach and influence. So I think that is where this all comes together. So I definitely think the art of filmmaking, the art of storytelling becomes very important in how us in the Western society are moving forward in getting our stories and creating our content, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or what have you. So Ella, same question. Like, how have you decided to, are you doing solely film? Are you pivoting? Do you have extra things or other things that you're interested in?
So for us, it's a little complicated because if we want to do more thing, we will have to apply for more legal paper stuff.
Good point. Good point.
I think we can just talk about it in general, too.
But yes, in general, I would say, like for me, it's like I'm really trying to like have a broader term of like what I want. Like I'm trying to like with this film, I also did some like writing and producing. But yes, so like if I want to like really if I really want to like have two very different paths, it would be a little difficult. But we'll figure it out. We'll see how it goes. Briell, do you have anything you want to say to that?
Yeah, for me personally, I mostly do independent producing right now. But kind of like to what Keith asked like about earlier about like, you know, parents wanting you to do a more stable job and all that. That still happens, even though right now my parents have accepted, okay, I'm in film and entertainment, but they will still, because right now I do like independent stuff, right? Like independent projects. So it's not as stable, which is always in their concept, like what's good. But to me, what I'm looking for at this stage is like variety of something new that would excite me. You know, I would want to experience more in newer things. But so the conversation will still happen with my mom. Sometimes just like, oh, even though you're in film, but there are still stable jobs in film and, you know, industry. So maybe you can try to find those jobs, but, you know, it still happens. But to me, in general, so like right now, I solely focus on film or film, like TV entertainment, just like being creative and content creating. What I do appreciate and I kind of want to touch on with like what other, filmmakers have talked about, which I really appreciate is I think in modern times, with multimedia and platforms being available to us, I think it really gives us more opportunities to to have our own voice and be more active and initiative in creating our own little space. I think that's so we can be more, it's more possible for us to actually double up or triple up doing different things at the same time, which to me is always a great thing, because I think even if you have your sole passion, you shouldn't limit your life to only just one thing. Like, and even if other things can just be your hobbies, but I think I always like kind of want to encourage myself and other people to just keep pursuing. And even if it's just a hobby, even if it's just for a temporary time, but everything, what I believe is everything that you experience, either good and bad, they incorporate into your being as a person. And that's always going to come back helpful to you. Like in a way, maybe you won't know. And especially for storytellers, that's always going to be very valuable to your stories. That's what I believe. Yeah.
That's a much better answer.
No, it's a great point, and thanks for reminding the challenges of
the challenges are also real. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a philosophical saying, right? Like there's do what you love. That's one thing that people often say, but there's also the do what you like to do in order to fund your passions, right? So it's not a right or a wrong, but it's a good way to think about it. It's kind of what I encourage the people I mentor. It's like, don't do something you hate, but do something that you're comfortable with or you love, and then you can then fund your passions from that. So thanks. Tam, because you do so many things, you haven't parked your other activities. You're still doing all of it, or have you down selected some things and worked on others?
So I have had to learn how to prioritize my health. So I am in a bit of a pivot right now. I actually let go of my parking management companies and focusing on just my one business as a consultant. But I'm also all of my passion is all about community. So I'm a board president for a nonprofit out in San Francisco called Dear Community, where we're accidental activists that came together following one of the violence acts that happened in San Francisco. And so we host a lot of community events where people come out, and we bring a lot of small business owners, Asian small business owners, Asian creatives to just kind of be in this space and connect people with one another. So I have that going on. I'm still definitely putting a lot of attention on Rising from the Fall, because the film is important, but also like I work on this film with one of my best friends, you know, so it's also like our way of really like being able to keep in touch and connect with each other. And that's pretty much it. I would definitely have to say that, like what you mentioned earlier, Keith, about pivoting, like I would have to say like that's something that's doable. And absolutely, I would say everything that you experience, you know, from middle school, high school, college, and after that, it definitely does integrate, and you're gonna figure out how to make that time. You know, anything that matters, you're gonna figure out how to make that time. It's the same way we all came here today at like 6 o'clock, actually 5 o'clock, just to prepare for it. It matters, right? And so sometimes we might feel like, oh, we might not. We can't. We have to pick one or the other. But I mean, I would have to say I definitely keep busy because I'm naturally just a really restless person, but all of these things matter to me, so I figure it out.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's not an either or, it can be an and. I spent 2 decades or more in corporate. I was an executive and I got tired of it. And I now am passionate about helping companies create and mentor startups. And so that's really where you can do all those things. I wanted to ask you, Tam, because I think it's relevant. You actually kind of mentioned that your parents brought you to your first protest at a young age. Do you see your work as a form of activism, and how is that manifested for you?
Definitely. Like right now, in San Francisco, the Asian hate rate, the Asian hate crime rate has risen to like a 536%. And that's an alarming number. It's a bittersweet thing for me because what my nonprofit, along with other organizations, did is that we went out into the community and told people like, hey, like, here's how to report what happened to you. Let's start talking about it. That's why we host these community events where, you know, maybe we're not ready to talk about it just yet, but you're with people that understand that experience. And so the documentary that I'm doing, it is in a way in a form of activism because it is trying to make you understand that together, you know, as a community, we can hold our own space and have that area for us to really, really talk and share about our stories and make people aware. You know, I didn't know that Asian hate crimes were happening out in Canada too. And had you not mentioned it, I would have never been educated on that. And so that's why it just, all of this is just so important.
Yeah, it's a good point. And not just Canada. When we were doing social audio on a platform called Clubhouse, we had met Asians in Europe and Asians in the UK, and they had a huge rise of Asian hate as well. In fact, 20 years ago, there wasn't even the term Asian the way we know it, because usually in Europe, it's more identified with South Asians or East Indians, but it was a huge amount of violent crimes against Asians in Europe as well. So it was something that was really, sadly, came out of the pandemic. And I mean, we see it all the time everywhere now. And I think really when we talk about the huge increase in hate incidents against Asians everywhere, it's not that it's a huge increase. It's that the Asians don't report it and they don't talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so now we're at a revelation, you know, things are changing. And so as long as all the filmmakers here are able to continue pulling out all the different stories, all the different perspectives that we have in the Asian community, it's easier for us to be able to connect with one another.
Yeah, thanks, Tam. And then also for Briell and Ella, because we know your story, Ella, that you were trying out for parts. Do you find that how your art, how you created your art, that was also expression of activism as well?
Yes, for sure. I think with this film, like I think what I realized during the making of it was that there were so many people who had a similar story. There are people who came as at our age, like as an adult, as an undergraduate or as a graduate student, but there are also people on our film crew that came at a much younger age who experienced something very similar. And I felt like in us telling this story and making this film was really empowering for all of us to feel like we all had this shared experience and we all bonded because of it. Would you want to add anything else?
Sure. I would actually want to ask something more on a general term. I think we always want to, encourage filmmakers to keep pursuing art and keep telling stories. Another reason that's important to me is because kind of like what we touched on a little bit earlier in this session, that sometimes, you know, when we meet microaggressions or things that happen to ourselves or to other people, but we witness in our lives, it is really hard to speak up. And I definitely experienced that myself. And afterwards, I always like kind of feel very guilty of why I couldn't speak up. Either it's because this happened because from someone who's powerful or whatever. And I think art, in a way, it's great as activism or as a way of channeling however that feelings that you have in those situations. And in a way, it's like filmmakers or storytellers, you know, it's our way of phrasing and trying to communicate what we feel, and how it's kind of like our own way of fighting, you know, against this microaggression or things that we witness that maybe in real life we couldn't. And I think art is kind of like giving us this opportunity to, you know, make that happen, and actually in a more emotionally impactful way. So yeah, like I definitely see you know, art in general as activism, and also like our film, which I definitely didn't realize how making people understand that, oh, your experience is shared, is like understood, is like really important. You know, like I started to actually realize that after, you know, we show our films at different festivals, and there are people who come up to us, you know, after the showing and tell us how they resonate with it. And sometimes people, like, you know, it brought tears to their eyes. And what's more amazing is a lot of people who come up to us are not even like from the Asian descent. They could be from other backgrounds, but they also have a second language like the other than English. That's just like really beautiful like experience to have.
I think that's really important topic, right? Because I think that especially with East Asian culture, or more Southeast East Asian culture, we do a lot of things in silence, and we're very independent. And I mean, in terms of not saying what's on our minds, we're a very closed society, and we don't really know how to express or share our feelings. So to be able to put out art that people can resonate with and tell you, even those who aren't Asian, that can say that this has really touched them, that becomes you know, very important. And so I think that's why it's so important to tell our stories. Andrea, what do you think?
Yeah, so like with our film, Just Eat, we had a predominantly Asian crew, and just on previous sets I'd worked on and my experiences in film, it was mostly with Caucasians. And so when we had this predominantly Asian crew, it was just so cool to be able to connect on so many things and resonate on the stories, like as Briell was saying, like just having a story that everyone's so passionate about and able to relate to, and we're all here to make art and come together to tell a story that is important for all of us. Like that was, I would say that's an act of activism, because we're getting a story out there, we're starting conversations, even if it's just between crew or like people watching. And if people can see that representation on screen, that's gonna, at least for 1% of people, change a little something in their brain, like, oh, we see that this has happened, so we can talk about it more. Or just I think like film is so powerful, and if people can see themselves or see relatable things on that medium, it really is a form of activism and can really make a change.
Yeah, that's a good point. Alison?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. When I make films, the first thing that doesn't come to my mind that, oh, I'm being like an activist in telling this story, but I think those are one of the benefits, because I can bring a unique light to a story, and people might have not necessarily like experienced that in their own life. And it, like Drea said, it brings up different conversations. And even in my own personal experience being in film school, I don't really have any Asian teachers at all. So when I try to create stories that are directly related to my family and, you know, certain members of my family, they're like, oh, this is unrealistic. Like people wouldn't act like this, but it's kind of coming from their own perspective. But because of that, my story is not being told through that. So I think especially through this film, Dre and I made it basically by ourselves, and then got our amazing, mostly Asian crew with us. So it felt really empowering to be able to make all those decisions by ourselves.
Thank you. Leanne?
Yeah, I just want to comment on when I'm seeing your films, and what you're creating is a real strong identity and helps us reflect on our own beliefs, on our own identity. I think there's a scene in Just Eat where the girl goes into the bathroom and she's also looking at her nose and she's looking at her eyes, and it's almost like there's nothing wrong with it, but we've been told by outside that we don't fit necessarily the same models of appearance that someone else's standards might be. And it was like, that's not necessarily, it's not strengthening our identity, it's pulling it down. And I really appreciated that scene. That really spoke to me, because we all have that idea of what we need to look like in order to be beautiful. And also, when you look about males, Asian American males are not represented in film and in the right way. There was a book that was written. One of our other filmmakers he was working with an author. He had written 10 years of books, tried to sell it to a bookmaker, a publisher, but like whatever, I don't want to mention any. And they said, no, because you're not representing Asian American literature in the way that we understand identity should be. It's like, oh my gosh, that was a slap in the face. So what we're doing right now is complete activism. We're representing characters in the right way. We're representing ourselves in a way that other people should look at and accept. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. And I'll give you a little anecdote. We were once talking about Asian professionals and different industries. So Silicon Valley, 50% of the professionals might be of Asian descent, but only 10% hit leadership ranks. And so as we talked about these numbers, the entertainment industry also said that it's pretty much the same thing. So we're talking to an Asian casting director who, when they have an Asian opening in Hollywood, 5,000 people will, male or female, will apply, and it'll be all Asians, Filipinos, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Japanese, because it's one role and nobody can tell the difference outside of Asians, that like they're not all the same thing. And that's a real struggle. So that's what I think about when I hear from Leanne and all of you. As we're coming to a close, I want to give everyone a chance to just go briefly through a description of their movie, and then we'll close up. But I want to thank everyone for being here. And so we'll start off with Briell and Ella.
Yes, so our film is about our protagonist, Zi, who is a Chinese theater student in an American university, and she is on the brink of losing the first role she got in college because of her accent. And then she is very determined to get rid of her accent, even though the line between an identity and a tool set becomes very blurred.
Great, thank you. And Tam?
So mine is a documentary. You'll get to meet 9 different families where they get to share from their perspective what it was like coming to the United States or growing up in the United States. And then the families get to sit down together and then start asking questions. One of my favorite questions in the video is when the younger generation asked their parents, like, what were you doing at my age? And I remember one of the younger generation, he was 22 years old at the time when he asked that question, and his father responded that I was a prisoner of war, and so there's a lot to unpack there. So I hope you guys watch the documentary.
Thanks, Tam. Andrea and Alison?
So Just Eat is about Katie, who is a Canadian-born Korean, and she's our protagonist. And she's teased by her friends as a young child due to bringing ethnic food, which is unusual and weird to her peers. And then we flash forward, and the film basically shows how she deals with life following that trauma. So pretending to not understand Korean when she's with her friends, and doing everything she can to fit in with her peers around her, as they all look different from her. So she'll do anything from eyelid tape, contouring her nose, dressing differently, all of that. And throughout this all, her mother disagrees with it, but we also see the conflict because they come from differing backgrounds, where our protagonist grew up in Western society, even though she's Asian, and her mother is an immigrant. And so we see the conflict that happens there and the connections of Asian culture with food and how they use that to reconcile. And in the end, we see how Katie accepts her Asian identity and how she stands up in her way to her peers that have been making the microaggressions that she had let slide earlier on in the film.
Thanks a lot, Andrea, and thanks everyone for being part of our event tonight. Again, I want to thank Leanne for inviting me to host. Leanne, any closing thoughts?
I just want to thank everyone also for coming. Keith, fabulous job. I love hearing how you bring the conversation through everybody and getting the most important conversation out. So thank you so much for bringing your expertise to this wonderful group of filmmakers. They all deserve fabulous accolades, and I just am so proud of everybody and everyone what's done. It's thank you so much for sharing your honest opinion and your experience. And I'm just so excited to see all these films on the online element of our film festival. Please, you have a week to watch these films. It is Just Eat, it is The Closing Night, and Rising from the Fall. Please watch them. You'll be glad you did.
Right, and as a reminder, it's the Silicon Valley Asian Pacific Film Fest from the contemporary Asian theater scene. You can go to svapfilmfest.org. The in-person, if you're in Silicon Valley, is October 28th through 29th at the AMC Dine-In in Sunnyvale. And the online is October 28th through November 6th. So with that, I want to thank everyone. Great conversation. I'm going to see all the films and hope to see you all soon. So take care.